Welcome to the Burn Bootcamp podcast. I'm your host, Morgan Klein, co-founder and CEO, along with my husband and company visionary, Devin Klein.
And together, with our amazing team, we are going to help you push past your limits, not just physically in our gyms, but right here, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually on the Burn Bootcamp podcast.
Together, we will take on challenges and break through barriers to transform into the best possible version of ourselves. We are more than a gym. We are a community. Your community. Let's go, Burn Nation.
Burn Nation, what is up, everybody? Welcome back to the podcast. It's your host, DK, and I'm back with another episode of Ask Devin Anything. This has been really fun, and if you enjoyed them, it's kind of like this episodic conversation that we're having. Podcast at burnbootcamp.com is the place where we are submitting questions, and you guys are doing an amazing job of that. And it's really cool because we're picking out questions that actually are like episodic in nature, so that if you'd like to, you can go back and you can listen to these kind of every week as we sit down and talk all things personal development, fitness, mind, body, nutrition, and, just really my experiences of growing Burn Nation and trying to really inspire and empower you and your friends. So if you have somebody in your life that you think would like the podcast, please share it with them. We're growing. I'd like to be growing faster, but we are growing. And of course, if you know anything about me, that's always going to be the case. But we're just happy to be here, whether it's 1 or 1 million people that are listening to this right now. It doesn't matter. To us, we vow to educate, influence, and inspire every life that we have the privilege of serving. And so with that being said, Cindy asked the question. Let's see. I'm actually going to go through the 4 questions that I'm going to address today. And I'm really excited about it because I think there's a ton of information here, experiences from my own life. I think there's be some good metaphors too to understand some complex things. But let me read the questions first, and then we can get moving, okay? Number 1, Cindy from Anderson Township, Ohio asked, I have heard you talk about meditation before on the podcast. Could you please elaborate on the different types of meditation you use and the benefits you've seen since practicing it? Okay, why do I meditate? To control my thoughts. We're going to get more into that as we move on. But question number 2 is from Rebecca, Prosper, Texas. Shout out Prosper, Texas. You have talked about how exercise and training are different. Could you discuss more about the differences and why training is so important? I'm not demonizing exercise. Exercise keeps you active. Training makes you better. We're going to dive into that, Rebecca. Number 3 is from Stacia from Harrisburg, North Carolina, and she asks, what is the difference between complete and incomplete proteins, and why does it matter? Well, Stacia, I'm no scientist, but here's what I've learned coming soon. And then Leah from Indian Land is the final question. Shout out to Indian Land, South Carolina. And she asks, what time management strategies have helped you to scale your business efficiently? Woo, I love this little mix here. And we got producer Chelsea and producer Jordan behind the scenes making sure that your voice is heard. It's podcast at burnbootcamp.com if you want to be featured on this episode or one of the future episodes. Okay, so we're going to dive in to each question, and I'm really excited. I got a chance to read these last night, so anytime I get a chance to read them in advance, I am able to kind of marinate on them overnight, and the answers become more clear. Actually, what becomes more clear is like the stories that are associated with it, and I'm going to do a better job of that. I went back and listened to a few of my own episodes, and I just talk a lot of fact, but I don't tell a lot of stories, and I have a lot of stories to share. So stick with me for the 4 today, and hopefully you're going to take something away from this because that is the goal, all right? It's not just to answer questions. It's so that you can actually take something away. All right, Cindy, here we go. I have heard you talk about meditation before on the podcast. Could you elaborate more on your different types of meditation you use and the benefits you've seen from practicing it? Okay, so why do I meditate personally is to do one thing and one thing only, and that's control my thoughts. If you believe that your thoughts are the seeds to your words, and then your words are then the seeds to your actions or your behaviors, and then your behaviors then lead into your experiences, And then your experiences, if you accumulate all of them together, you mash them together, that's just called life. And whether we experience good experiences or negative experiences, we call that quality of life. And so if you follow me on that, then you believe this now, that controlling the thoughts that come into your head is actually the difference between having a high quality of life or not. You follow that pathway? Okay, so for me, meditation is all about doing this, controlling my thoughts, or AKA, a synonym to that is emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence. Who has heard of the word emotional intelligence before? You might have seen it as called like EQ. And, EQ is sometimes like confused for IQ. IQ and EQ are different. IQ is like your natural born, can't move intelligence, and EQ is a malleable intelligence that you get from experiences in the world and your ability to control your emotions, your thoughts, your beliefs, and ultimately your actions. So why do I meditate? Well, because if you're Devin Klein and you come from a background where, frankly, I grew up around people who were very emotionally small. They had no emotional intelligence, or frankly, emotional idiots. And they had no idea how to control their emotions. And so I get to grow up watching this, my whole life. Especially the important emotions, the ones that ruin or take down most people. There's two of them. What are they? Do you know? You probably just thought about at least one of them. It's anger and fear. Anger and fear. And so my father was so fearful of not being the man anymore, frankly. He was the man. He was a McDonald's All-American basketball player, had a full ride to Xavier, turned it down to go play baseball, professional baseball, Detroit Tiger, small town, called him the Iceman. They put banners up in high school for him, right? That was the peak of his life, and he feared nothing more than not having that. And so he would then, because of that fear, lash out in anger to those around him and have to dominate the people around him to maintain the top of his own personal hierarchy. So, he was very violent, and he beat my mother and other women, and he did that to maintain control of his life. He wouldn't be able to articulate it like that, but that's the analyst, that's the practical armchair psychoanalyst in me that looks at my dad and my whole background, and we say, why do we do the things that we do? Well, because his anger was a manifestation of his fear. And so I observed this. I observed him having a lot of pain in his heart that he never dealt with. And his father used to abuse alcohol and used to abuse him and his brothers, and my uncles all turned to drugs and crime and, the things that we turn to when we don't have direction or control or strategy in life. And so, then then you end up idolizing the wrong people. So my dad would idolize my great uncle. This is a crazy story. My great uncle, Uncle Steve, he was a robber. He was a bank robber. And my uncles and my father all idolized my Uncle Steve. And he was known, I think they called him the gentleman's bandit, because he was so nice. And he would rob banks in Southwest Michigan and just do it in a really nice way. Hey, do you mind if I rob you? That type of thing. But anyways, he was in prison. And, when you grow up without direction, you end up idolizing people like that. And so I guess my point is, you have to be able to master your ability to control your thoughts, or else your thoughts will control you, because most of what we think of is negatively inherent, because our thoughts that just come in, and no one knows consciousness, no one knows how thoughts arise. They arise and they either serve you or they don't serve you. And it's inherently hard to succeed because you have so many inherently negative thoughts, because those thoughts, what we do know, or what we do try to piece together, is that a lot of negative thoughts are because we're trying to keep ourselves safe. But we're now in 2025, and we don't need to run from tigers and bears anymore. And our emotional intelligence, our awareness needs to evolve, and you have to do that. I'm getting back to your question, I promise, Cindy. You have to do that intentionally. I grew up my whole life watching unintentionality with emotional intelligence, and I come from the same DNA as these people. I have the same obsessive tendencies. It's just my father and my uncles chose to take it in a negative, undirected way, and I chose to witness that and say intuitively that can't be right because it doesn't look right. And I meditate because those tendencies arise in me, those obsessive tendencies arise in me, and if I don't master those, or if I don't hold myself accountable to my own thoughts and to owning them versus not owning them, it's called self-control, then I guess, like I said at the top of this, you don't have a good quality of life. And I refuse to go the direction that I grew up witnessing. Hopefully that makes sense. So that's why I personally meditate. Everyone needs to find their own reason, but it's all going to boil down to how good are you at controlling your thoughts, and you can always get better. And so, okay, so let's get into the more practical stuff now that you kind of know why. So meditation for me is pretty advanced at this point, so I'm going to go back to where I started. Right now, today, I do about 25 to 30 minutes, 3 or 4 times a week, whenever I need it, whenever I feel it. It's not some regimented, rigid thing that I wake up and do every morning. It's whenever I need it. Whenever I start feeling myself like having a lot of thoughts that I'm not necessarily enjoying the way that I'm feeling. And then I sit down for about 30 minutes and I do Kundalini meditation, which is, without getting like too into it, it's like you have the energy centers of your body, the pituitary gland, all the way down to really there's an area where your pelvic floor muscles, and then everything in between. And so what you're going to try to do is you're going to try to breathe in and simultaneously engage those chakras, they're called, and those energy centers in your body, and bring energy like water through a straw up your spinal column and into your head, and try to give your head energy. Try to put energy into your, I said pituitary gland, I meant pineal gland. Put energy into your pineal gland, and it's thought that when you put energy into your pineal gland, that might be where you can access a deeper layer of consciousness. Whether that's true or not, who knows? I'm not a scientist. All I know, and I don't think anybody knows, all I know is it feels good to do that, and it's an advanced way to do it. Most people are not going to start there. I'm going to give you 4 quick ways that you can start meditation, and you can work your way into a Kundalini meditation, but it has a lot to do with, that Kundalini style has a lot to do with advanced breath work, advanced breath retentions, really trying to challenge yourself. And I do oftentimes will do that inside of like 185-degree sauna, which is a whole nother layer of intensity. But most of us, if you're not advanced, then you won't start there. I want you to start at one of these 4 places that I think are really good for you. Box breathing's number 1. Very easy. It's an inhale, hold, exhale, hold, 4 seconds each. Calm your mind. That's all you're trying to do. You're just trying to control your thoughts. Thoughts come in. Concentrate on inhale, hold, exhale, hold, 4 seconds, calm your mind, let it out. Body scan is number 2. You can kind of slowly just relax and take 5 minutes to slowly just scan your body. Go all the way down, breathing in and out very slowly, 2 seconds in, 2 seconds out, scanning your body all the way down. And 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 mindfulness is also good. It's like 5 things. This has to do with your senses. 5 things I can see, 4 things I can touch, 3 things I can hear. You know what I mean? And you go, and so you use your senses, and what that does is it forces you to stay in the moment. It forces you to control your thoughts. Any thoughts that come in are broken because now I'm focused on just my commands, my 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 mindfulness. And then you have like mantras, which most of you have heard, where you can say like one thing over and over and over and over and over and over. That's always a good way to start. For me, early on when I started this, I would actually walk and do my mantra. Which walking meditation would be my 5th one for you. But I would combine those 2, and I would walk and do a mantra early on, and all I would do is walk around when I used to have a lot more self-doubt, and I used to feel other people's guilt and shame and kind of embody that for myself. And so I'd go out and just use the word unstoppable, right? Because what that meant to me was that no matter what gets in your way, pure intention always wins, and you're unstoppable because of your pure intention. And I would just repeat that over and over and over and over, okay? And so, I mean, this is just my experience, why I meditate, what types of meditation, a little bit about my journey. If you guys have any other questions about meditation, I'd like to say about a lot of things that I haven't become necessarily like a guru or an expert in. I hate that word. And, I don't think you're ever really an expert in anything. There's always somebody that knows more than you. But this is an area that I've uncovered just a lot of real practical application and really helped a lot of people control their thoughts just through my focus meetings and through talking with members. And so if you have any questions, podcast@burnbootcamp.com. Go ahead and send producer Chelsea an email. She's going to bring your question about meditation back on the podcast, and we can go deeper on anything that I said there. Okay, I know that was a lot. All right, we're going to move on to question number 2. Rebecca from Prosper, Texas asks, she asks, let me see. You have talked about how exercise and training are different. Could you discuss more about the differences and why training is so important? All right. So if you know anything about my philosophy, you know that A, I'm never going to demonize any form of movement ever, all right? But B, I am going to prioritize. And the main distinction that I want you to prioritize when it comes to your activity, which is an umbrella word for either exercise or training, the two things are made much differently. Exercise keeps you active. Training makes you better. Exercise is just an activity that you show up unhinged, unplanned, and you just do it. And training is planned. It has a goal. It's here to reach some specific performance outcome. Exercise is very casual. Training is very focused, okay? So hopefully you see the difference. So here's an example. When I was a San Francisco Giant, we would go through cycles, what we called periods. Okay, periodization, periodization. Now, these periods would have features called progressive overloads, sounding familiar to what we do here at Burn Boot Camp. Each one of these periods, the only difference would be sports specific to me. Our periods at Burn are very general. They're very general periods that will take any human being on the planet from a strong frame to a stronger frame. Right, from good to great, from beginner to advanced, and it will continue to show you next levels of advance. We stay in what's called hypertrophy. My cycles with the Giants, those periods were much, much different. I would go through periods of stability, balance. One in particular offseason, I went through a strength training regimen, a hypertrophy regimen, which consisted basically of 3 periods. I forget exactly how long they last, but they all equaled one offseason. And my period was basically designed to progressive overload on squats so I could get to a 10 rep max on my squat. That was 355, I think it was at the time, or 365 or something for 10 rep max. And that goal was reverse engineered from me having let's just call it what it is, having a crappy season, because my arm was just torn up all the time because I would use so much torque with my upper body because my lower body lacked the strength it needed, the force output off the mound to throw the ball harder consistently without getting injured. Do you see how specific that outcome is? Right? So now my training style is a squat periodization with progressive overload. And, you stay in hypertrophy. And, you kind of start with 15, sets of 15. And then you move to load up more weight, sets of 12 for the next period. And then sets of 10, 10, 10, 10. You even go down to sets of 5 and then work your way back up. So I don't remember the period exactly of how it worked. But all I know is at the end of it, I walked out and my next season was the best season. The first half of it was the best season I ever had. And because I had a specific training regimen that offseason that led me to addressing the issues and inefficiencies in my game, and now I turn that into a better game. So my question for you at home is where are your inefficiencies, right? It starts with awareness. Where are the gaps in your game, right? You got to know the gap. Growth is all an identification of the gap. And this is just back to emotional intelligence. This is just emotional intelligence, realizing that we all have gaps and that you're not better or worse for having gaps. We all have a mountain to climb, right? You all have obstacles on the way up to the peak of that mountain. Guess what? You're going to be better off if you identify them, okay? So that is why, for example, we have mesocycles at Burn Boot Camp, and human movement pattern periodization at Burn Boot Camp is specifically because we don't want you showing up and having undirected activity or exercise, which is all good. I'm all about it. I do exercise sometimes as well, but I've got a goal, and so this year my goal, I want you to, if you don't have a goal, let's go ahead and get one. Performance goals. Here's a little mini focus meeting. What's your performance goal? It doesn't have to be about weight loss. It doesn't have to be about body fat. It could be about how many pull-ups you want to do. It should be about how many pull-ups you want to do. It should be about the strength you can gain, right? Not the weight you can lose. It should be about the confidence that you get from those reps that you do, not the lack of confidence or self-esteem that you get from realizing that you need to lose weight because somebody told you. Okay, so for example, do you have a specific training goal? How about the Burn Boot Camp Strength and Conditioning Assessment? That might be a good one for you, depending on where you're at. Could be aspirational, or it could be just outside of the reach for you. But that's a good goal to have, because now we're working towards something. Now we can show up every day, and we know that the Strength and Conditioning Assessment has double unders, push-ups, burpees, pull-ups, jump squats, and a run. You know it has these things. So now when we do those things, you're intently focused on them in camp, and you know that you have to do unbroken double unders. So every time we go to do double unders in camp, you're going to do them in an unbroken way every time. Even if the trainer over the mic is like, hey, break and keep going, or, whatever it might be. It's just like, in your head, I've got this goal to do the SAC. I've got to do 25 unbroken. You follow what I'm saying here? Okay, I appreciate that question, Rebecca. And that is a great example of, a clarifying question, Rebecca, from Prosper, Texas. It is a clarifying question on the last episode when we talked about exercise and training. So shout out to Deeple at Prosper and Mo, franchise partners, and the whole amazing Prosper, Texas community. Love you guys. And Rebecca, great question. Okay. Stacia asked question number 3 today. She's from Harrisburg, North Carolina, right here in our backyard. Carolina del Norte, just in Mexico. Ask, where are you from? Carolina del Norte. Okay, I'm gonna do a podcast in all Spanish at some point for all my Latina and Latina guys and gals out there. Okay, what we're gonna do is dive into her question. Let's see. Okay, she asks, what's the difference between complete and incomplete proteins, and why does it matter? All right, so complete protein, incomplete protein, what's the difference? Well, I'm not a scientist. I don't proclaim to be. But here's what I've learned. And I'll keep it as simple as kind of I know, and then you can do your own research on this if you'd like to get more sciencey. I'm much more of a metaphor guy. I don't like to learn stuff and then repeat the NASM book that I learned onto you, because in my experience is you don't care. It's enough with the complete amino acid profiles and leucine and muscular protein synthesis and all this stuff. So I'm going to give you a metaphor that will probably get you to understand it and for it to click so that you understand why a complete protein is much, much better for you than an incomplete protein. So a complete protein has a complete amino acid profile. It's got complete branch chain amino acids, especially leucine, and leucine is we call it the muscle building amino acid, and it's in animal proteins, in chicken, eggs, red meat. Animal proteins, you're going to find complete proteins. In most plant proteins, you're going to find incomplete proteins. and leucine is going to be the biggest difference. It's going to be really low in plant protein. It's going to be higher in animal protein. And you want to get about 2.5 to 3 milligrams per meal, I think is like the going recommendation by mainstream. And so, listen, okay, yeah, to me that gets really boring and really confusing and like really fast. So I don't want to lose you. So I want you to think of a complete protein and incomplete proteins like the following. Okay, so a complete protein might be like a construction site. All right, I'm redoing my pool in my backyard right now, and complete protein would be the following metaphor. When they're building the pool, all the demolition construction equipment shows up, all the building materials are there, the bricks are there, the mortar's there, the rocks there, the wood's there, the PVC pipes to build the drainage are there, the travertine to lay the tiles there, the mortar to go in the travertine is all there. Okay? An incomplete protein is like all of those things except for the mortar, right? Except for the adhesive to the tile. Okay, so you have like most of the building materials on site, but in a complete scenario, that L-leucine is like that mortar. If I don't have that strong adhesive to really tighten down my pool tile and the travertine tile and to really make the foundation, if I don't have that cement to build the walls, well, those dirt walls and those loose tiles are going to start to give in, and they're not very strong in that sense, right? Okay, so now you add mortar and cement that you put in between all the tiles and that you hold the walls up and you build walls out of cement. Now I'm talking about that L-leucine ingredient being there, being really strong and creating a higher propensity for, that pool to be strong, or in terms of reverse engineering the metaphor, for your muscle to be strong. Your muscles, it's not that you can't build muscle if you don't have complete proteins. It's just that you're not going to build the strongest muscle possible. So for anyone that wants to like demonize plant protein because of its incompleteness, I'm not here for that, right? But I'm also not here for like the virtue side of it, where like, you only eat plant protein because you don't want to eat living things. Have you ever seen a plant in a 2-week time lapse? If you have never seen a plant in a 2-week time lapse, tell me that's not a living thing. Plants can communicate with one another. We know this. These are all living things. So living things are going to provide energy. Plants and animals are living things. They're going to provide energy. They're conscious. Plants are conscious. Animals are conscious. And we need to know the difference, but we don't need to necessarily know the science. If you'd like to know the science behind it, maybe the Huberman podcast is one of my favorite to go really deep, and that's where I kind of get all my baseline information. But I'm more of a practical person, so I want you to be able to be like, okay, I get it. Construction site complete, incomplete, understand, get it, got it, good. All proteins not created equal. Quality is more important than timing and type. And we should mix up our protein, and we should have plant, and we should have animal. We should get we should get leucine in our diet especially, and we should have a very kind of even-keeled conversation about plant versus whey versus complete versus incomplete and why it all matters. So Stacia, great question. Shout out to Mike and Andrea Hartshorn at the Harrisburg, North Carolina community. Day one OG franchise partners, have built an amazing business and community, and just really enjoy their partnership and appreciate Stacia's ability to reach out to podcast@burnbootcamp.com to ask her question. All right, y'all. It is about that time. So this will be the last question here of the day. And this one comes from Leah at Indian Land, South Carolina. And Leah is asking about time management. So we're going to talk about time management real quick. And she asks, what time management strategies have helped you scale your business efficiently? Oh, I like talking about business, Leah. The reason we talk about business, by the way, and time and nutrition and fitness, and because your world is shaped by all these things. If this, like, Burn Bootcamp doesn't exist to like for you to show up to the gym and then to just work out and like put that in a silo, because that's not how human beings work. We're very complex. We've got like 8 major categories if you could boil it down. It's like mind, body, emotion, spirit, relationship, time, work, money. Most everything that you could experience falls with, if not everything you can experience falls within those buckets in some way, shape, or form. So let's use that as a framework. And we can't just focus on like a 6-pack. That's not going to make us happy. We can't just focus on like being a millionaire. That's not going to make us happy. Like, how pretentious is that, right? Like, if that's your only focus in life, like, you can't just have like a great marriage, but then, you can't afford to pay your bills. That everything is intertwined. And so that's why we kind of have this full scope on the podcast. So Lee, I appreciate you asking the business question, actually, because it is a big part of our outlook, our perspective, our health, our well-being. All right. So I'm going to caveat this because from my perspective, my worldview, we have a huge misconception about time. Most people think time is this fixed entity, this thing that controls their life, and it's scarce, and we don't have enough of it, and time is your most valuable asset and your most valuable resource. It's like I said, from my worldview and my point of view, that perspective is bullshit. And let me explain why. Well, it's not an opinion. Time is actually relative. I know you've heard of this man, Einstein, theory of relativity, that actually talks about time is not fixed. Time is not one certain constant. It actually changes based on speed, based on gravity. I know you've heard this before, okay? This is accepted. Einstein's theory of relativity is accepted. But we still have the perspective that time is this fixed entity that controls our every movement, okay? So it's not, because the faster you move, like the faster you go to the speed of light, the slower time moves, okay? So the faster you move, slower time moves. That's really interesting. The GPS satellites tick a little bit slower than time here on Earth. So there's an adjustment for that in all of our cars. So knowing that, okay, I'm going to give you an example. This is probably one of my favorite examples I've heard recently. I'll give you 2 examples, actually. One comes from a musician. So if you know anything about me and like follow me on Instagram, you know, like I'm like a hobbyist and a sketch artist, and I like to, for fun, just to bring my creativity to life and to scratch that creative itch that sometimes I don't get to have inside of my business. Although business in itself is kind of a canvas and you're making an art. I have really grown to admire really creative artists. And so Lady Gaga, to me, is like, she can do it all. Creative, she's like a creativity engine. And so I was listening to her talk about how she writes songs, and she says, I don't really write songs. The songs write themselves. And, most people have this conception of like, writing a song takes time. Like, it must take time to create something so amazing. And Gaga has a famous interview where she says, actually, when one of my family members was passing, I wrote the famous song, Edge of Glory. You know that song, right? I'm not going to sing it. But you know Edge of... Yeah, you know that rhythm, Edge of Glory. Yeah, she wrote that in like 2 minutes, the whole thing. She said it in a podcast that it struck her, and now all of a sudden, this moment that took time to develop was captured instantaneously inside of her heart, inside of her intuition, and in 2 minutes, she wrote a timeless classic. Tell me how that makes sense. You can write a timeless classic in 2 minutes. It's an oxymoron, right? So it's proof that time actually is relative to gravity, to heart center, to intuition. Our heart is the center of our personal gravity. My mindset performance coach Derek Grant talks about this all the time, DG, how your heart is the human manifestation of gravity itself. And when you allow yourself to follow your intuition and follow your heart, meaning when you're doing what you love, time is relative to that. Have you ever been doing something you absolutely love? Like it is spending time with your children, you're on a vacation, and all of a sudden this 7-day vacation is over so fast, and you're like, what happened to that time? That's because gravity can speed time up. The satellites are slower than we are here on Earth. The closer you are to the center of gravity, the faster time goes. Do you follow what I'm saying? I know this is a little esoteric, but this is so true, isn't it? And it's not just my opinion. So I actually got a chance to sit down and talk with the famous DJ Marshmello about his creative process, and he basically said like the same thing as Gaga. He said the creative process is me getting an idea in my head, thinking about that idea all day long until my heart basically says sit down at some type of instrument or computer and lay this down, and then I do it almost instantly. There's no schedule that he puts on, to like next Wednesday at 3 p.m. I'm going to write, Miles on It with Kane Brown. Like that doesn't happen. So your heart is like gravity, and your plan is like speed. Okay, so when you follow your heart and you have a plan, now we start to take all this esoteric stuff and we get practical. All right, I wrote about this in Stop Starting Over. Time as it sits here where our 2 feet are, which is how most people conceive of time, is this fixed 168 hours that we have, the time ticking on our clock, right? Which, by the way, is relative to what now? Our heart and our plan, our intuition and our plan to go out and execute that intuition. And as Gaga can fold time in half and write a timeless classic in 2 minutes, you can do the same with your schedule, and you can follow your heart. So I'm now going to break down, now that you know heart and plan, I'm going to break down quickly the 168-hour perspective. I wrote about this deeply in Stop Starting Over. If you'd like to get that book, I released it in August of 2017. You can get it on Amazon.com, Stop Starting Over by Devin Klein. You could also check out our newest release, the USA Today best-selling Burn, a 5-step strategy to inner and outer strength. And if you'd like to purchase both, well, that would make your boy happy, and I appreciate that very much. So the 168-hour rule is something that is it's really just a perspective. It's like everybody gets 168 hours in the week. It's 24/7, 24 times 7, right? And how you use that time really matters. It's not how much time you have. This is how somebody can, let's just use business, for example. That's where your question comes from. Somebody can create $1 billion business, and at the same time, somebody can create a business that makes $1 million and then fails. Same amount of time. Okay? One musician, one artist, one movie star can put out 15 titles, and the same time somebody can put out 1. Okay? So what we want to do is we really want to just break down time in itself, okay? And then you can start to really categorize, I think, and take an audit of where your time is at and how it's actually being spent right now. I think awareness is the first step to all this. Like, do this exercise and just find out where you're at. Because most of us are saying something in how many, like, raise your hand or just admit to yourself out loud right now, look at yourself in the mirror and be like, yeah, that's totally me. That's totally you. You raise your hand sometime during the week on a regular basis and you say, I don't have time. I'll raise my hand because I do the same thing. We're all human. Okay, what we're really saying instead of we don't have time is that said thing is not a priority, that we actually do have the time for it, but it's not important enough to me for it to acquire this fixed amount of time that I have, right? So if you say, I don't have time, then your perspective of time is actually way off. And it's not, it's counterintuitive, I know it is, but it's not the actual definition of time. Again, Einstein's opinion, not mine. So if you say I don't have time, what you really mean is I'm not prioritized, I don't have organization, I don't have a plan, and I'm not following my heart. That's what I don't have time means. It's I'm doing things I don't like to do. I'm prioritizing things in my plan I don't like to do. Therefore, I'm getting closer and closer to this fixed amount of time because time isn't folding in on things that I don't enjoy. Do you follow this? I know. Do you guys follow this in-house here? I know this one's a little complex. It gets a little esoteric, and I'm trying to bring it down to like the practical level. This one took me the longest to master. If I'm a master at it, it took me the longest to master, and I think that I've got a good hold on my own time at this point because I can look at myself in the mirror and say I'm doing only what brings me positive energy and joy. Even when something negative happens, I'm mostly experiencing positivity and joy. So are you? Are you mostly experiencing positivity and joy and peace? And if you're saying I don't have time, then my guess is you have room. You've got some meat on the bone to live a more maximized quality of life. Okay, so there's a few buckets here. Okay, so like you have kind of your essentials, your non-negotiables, sleep, right? Essential commitments. Sleep for me is number one. Date night's number two. The two essential commitments in life, okay? You got to have those. You got to have date night, people. If you're married out there, got to have it. All right? And don't talk about work. If you guys happen to work together, talk about that's my number three non-negotiable. Don't talk about work at date night. Just talk about things that like have no significance at all. Like the color on the walls is pretty, and just be a normal person. Don't talk about your business 24/7, especially with your wife who's your CEO. Maybe that's contextual to us, who knows, but maybe that resonates with one of you. Health and fitness is the other bucket. Personal development, health and fitness is like workouts, meal prep, recovery, nutrition, time for your health and fitness, okay? Your body, your temple. Most important in my philosophy is the body is the gateway to a happy and healthy life. It's the gateway to positive energy, and it's the easiest metaphor to train other areas of your life by training, not just merely exercising. Personal development in buckets like learning, reading, growth, 5 Klein family values. In case you've never heard this before, for us it's learn, love, lead, grow, play. Between those 5 things, we're personally accountable to our family and our values. Relationship and family, time with friends, kids, mom, dad, and then your passions and your purpose, your work, your deeper why, your hobbies, your activities in your life. Yes, there's an element of plan that happens to those things, but time is sped up when you're following the deeper why, when you are pursuing the passions that set you on fire, pursuing the things where money isn't an important priority, but is a byproduct of your passion, okay? So I want you to be alert on something this week, okay? And we're going to wrap up. I want you to be alert for something this week. When do you say, I don't have time? When do you say that? Okay, like I'm putting that in your prefrontal cortex right now, in the big front part of your brain, this big awareness part of your brain. It's called your RAS, your reticular activating system. It's like your heat seek. It's like your scope. Okay, it's like the laser on a sniper. It's pointing to your targets. The more you think about, the times in which you're saying I don't have time, the more I plant that in your mind. Now you're going to notice it. Okay, if it's important to you, you're going to notice it. That's what the RAS does. It brings things to your awareness consciously that you want to be brought to you. Now you're going to have an opportunity to wedge that open and say, why am I saying this? Yeah, that's a dumb thing. I do have time. Time works for me. It doesn't work. I don't work for it. Oh, it's because I do have the time. I just hate this thing that I'm doing. Or I don't want to do the thing you're asking me to do. So instead of just telling you no and having pure energy in a conversation in which I say, no, thank you, I do not want to do that because it does not bring me peace, happiness, and joy, you'll say, no, I don't have time, which comes with negative emotion. Tell people the truth. You don't have time for that. I ain't got no time for that. All right? Appreciate you guys being here today with these 4 questions and your time. If anything struck a chord with you, share this with a friend in Burn Nation, a Burn member, a mom, a sister, a dad, somebody that goes on walks, somebody that wants to hear about personal development. They want to hear kind of well-rounded conversations around tips, tricks to get better, and core philosophy, most importantly. I'm going to continue to do these for the foreseeable future until you tell me to stop, and it seems like they're getting more and more popular with you out there in Burn Nation. Podcast at burnbootcamp.com if you want to ask a question. And we're on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple, wherever you prefer. Leave a comment, leave a review. Lots of stuff to do here at the end. But you know what? I appreciate you for doing it. 2 claps on 2, 1, 2.